Hello YouTube, welcome to the Nutrition Q&A number 3. It has been a year ever since I made an episode on the topic, so it's time to get back into it. The first question is by Dr. Winnie Hutt Jr., who asks, "Hey man, what's your source on claiming that supermarket produce has low micronutrient content? I've heard conversely that GMOs are made to yield higher amounts of nutrients per plant, but I've not viewed the evidence myself. Curious as to what fuels your viewpoint." So these are two different things to start with. GMO and supermarket produce is not the same thing. I'm not going to discuss the topic of GMO here. It might very well be possible that GMO has more nutrition per plant, which would be expected because it's sort of the goal of GMO. It's to be able to produce crops that resist insects, that don't necessitate as much pesticide, that therefore are supposedly more apt to reducing world hunger as a whole. At least that's how they got pitched to the general public. Now, whether or not they create other type of dysfunctions in the body because of the genetic manipulation that gave birth to them is a different question altogether. As for the reason why I tell people that the type of vegetables and fruits they can buy at supermarkets is lower in terms of micronutrients, it's very simple. It's because all fruits and vegetables tend to be low on the scale, especially if you live in a country that practices year-round agriculture. There used to be a time where we would do what is called la jachère. La jachère is when you're going to only cultivate a ground, a soil for a select amount of time, and then you're going to let it regenerate. And what needs to regenerate is the minerals in the ground itself. The fruits don't produce their own minerals. They take it from the ground. That's how they grow. The issue is that in this modern world, we have found other ways to make the vegetables grow. We have found ways to also make them look juicy and give them certain colors, but all of that is artificial, meaning that it has no correlation with what they actually yield, with the nutrition inside them. Anyone who has eaten a tomato or a cucumber that grew on fertile soil will tell you that, because it's a completely different taste, it's a completely different texture. When you bite into a tomato that is full of nutrients, there's a taste. It's almost like a fruit. And it saddens me to think that there are people on the channel who don't know what I'm talking about, because you've only been eating supermarket tomatoes, which taste like nothing. They taste like water. There is no taste. Why? Because they are completely devoid of any nutrition. Same for cucumbers. An actual cucumber has a very flavorful texture to it and savor. There is a cucumber taste. Most cucumbers you buy in supermarkets, it's like you're eating a steak made of water. That's what I meant by that. Now, it's not just supermarkets, as I said, it's just all of the producers. But if you look around where you live, and you're not someone who lives in a big city, you will be able to find someone who sells products that grew on a soil that actually was full of minerals, and you will see the difference. Of course, it will be much more expensive, but it's much better for your health overall. So that's what I was saying. I have no source on that, although I'm certain that you can find that, because there is a reason why we use what is called as les engrais. So it's fertilizers, right? That's why we use fertilizers nowadays, is because it allows us to cultivate the ground and the soil year round, because it replaces the minerals that usually are going to help the vegetables grow. But in all reality, they don't replace shit. The only thing they do is they allow the vegetable to grow. Does it mean that the vegetable is going to be, again, full of nutrition? The answer is no. We can make tomatoes the size of my head, they're still garbage. So that's that. Second question by Messed Up Smiley. Hello NH, what do you think about calorie consumption on rest days? Should it be equal to the consumption on working days? Should the macros be split the same way? Very good question. A lot of people will tell you that if you, for example, have a diet that also is considered of carbs, it is a good idea to selectively consume the carbs at certain times or before certain days. Meaning that, for example, you would be better off eating a very carb-heavy meal 3-4 hours before a big workout, because that's when it makes the most sense. It's going to fuel the workout the most, etc., etc. You would be better off eating proteins before bed, because it's going to satiate you greatly. All of that are rules of thumb that you can follow. As for myself, the way I see it is that usually I want to feel the fullest in terms of belly on my lower body days, because I know that if I feel hungry, it's going to mess up my performance because I'm not going to be able to perform or to focus. Even though it's just a physical sensation, the idea that I'm not at 100% in terms of capacity is something that messes with my head. However, for upper body days, it means nothing to me because I feel like it has no influence. So I have a tendency to eat more on lower body days. But inversely, I also have a tendency to eat more carbs on upper body days. These are just preferences. You should really be playing with it and see what works best for you, because keep in mind that it's not just about the content of the meal or the calories and macros, it's also about the timing of said meal. That can play a big role. So, if we're talking rest days, however, I would argue that if you are taking a rest day, you can eat less. Now, keep in mind one thing. A rest day is something that helps you recover from work you've done in the past. So, you don't want to eat nothing. You still need nutrients to recover the muscles and then to be able to go back into it the next day. But you can reduce the calories. That's something that I do, for example. If I don't train on a certain day, I'm mostly going to consume proteins and vegetables that are not heavy in carbohydrates, because I just don't need the calories for that day. It's a practice that I encourage everyone to actually try once or twice, unless you're someone who continuously needs a lot of calories because you are a hard gainer. And for the macros is a different question altogether, in my opinion, because you need first and foremost to decide the type of macros that are good for you. Don't follow the guidelines of people who tell you, oh, everyone needs that much protein, that much fat, that much carbs, or who tell you, yeah, 80% carbs and then like 10% fats, 10% protein, or whatever arbitrary quotas that people made up. Find it for yourself. I know that for me, I eat a ton of carbs, almost no fat, and a tiny bit of protein. Why? It's what works the best for me. It's what allows me to keep growing. Someone else would not work the same way. So if we're just going to talk about rest days again, I personally, my macros on rest days is what I already said, where I lower the carbohydrates almost to zero, but that's the only moment where I don't hit carbohydrates. So again, play with it, and I'm sure you're going to find something that works for you. Next question by Luca. I am bulking in a small surplus. I've been gaining some mass, but when I look in the mirror, I'm always bloated. Is this normal, and should I keep bulking, or will I just get more and more bloated? Thanks. So, you've gotten to a point where you are bulking, so you're eating in a surplus, and what you see in the mirror is an excess of adipose tissue or water weight. The question at this point is, why are you still bulking? Because you're clearly not getting what you want from the bulk. I know that it's something that people forget, but you're supposed to gain muscle on the bulk. The fat that comes with it is going to be around the muscle or is inside the muscle. But if it's just around your waist or in your face, what is the point? Unless you see gains somewhere else in the body, if the only thing you notice is bloat, it might very well be that your body has tapped out, meaning that you are at a point where the caloric surplus that you give your body is not needed, so it just stores it as fat. And I know it's not something popular to say because the bulk is extremely popular with people that want to be big, but keep in mind one thing. If something like this happened to you and you keep eating and eating, the only thing you're getting is extra fat that will need to be cut down at some point. Because any bulk is only really the preemptive stage of a cut. And that's the issue of the yo-yo bulking and cutting cycles. People who gain way too much fat and have to struggle to lose the fat, then have to go through a bulk again to regain all that mass, and it leads to nothing. So in your situation, maintenance or cut, a small deficit, because you say you bulk in a small surplus, but bloat doesn't just appear. It might very well be that your bulk was a little bit too enthusiastic in a sense. You weren't really doing what you were supposed to be doing, and now you're seeing the results of that. So be careful. Pedro le Chef, what are your thoughts on artificial sweeteners like stevia or just in general? I believe that these sweeteners are certainly not as innocent as many people would like them to appear, meaning that I don't quite understand why some people pretend that they have no impact or that they're completely harmless. That's not possible. They have an impact on your body. Now, is it a good or a bad impact? I don't know. The thing I would like to point out, however, is that the people who eat those sweeteners and then try to defend it can never answer the following question. Why do you need things that you eat to be sweet in the first place? Are you a 5-year-old? Do you need everything to eat to taste scrumptious? I don't get it. Especially when it's grown men who say stuff like this, and it only feels like a temper tantrum. Like you're trying to take away their sugar, so they're being upset and they tell you, well, it's not real sugar, so it's fine. No, it's not fine. The real danger of sugar and sweeteners in general is the addiction to the taste. The damage it does to your health is damage done to your health at the end of the day. But the inability to do away with something sweet is questionable. And I know that it's not necessarily your fault if you're like that. You most likely were growing up being fed a ton of bullshit like we all were. And it's insane to see how much our culture, especially in the West, has linked childhood with sugar. Meaning that look at Halloween, look at the candies or the bars or the cakes that we give kids, full of fucking sugar. Look at the beverages pushed on kids. Look at, for example, what is the term, like the Sunny D, look at the amount of sugar in that stuff. It's insane. All of that is just ingrained in children from a young age. So I'm not surprised that people cannot detach themselves from it. But be it artificial sweeteners or sugar, the problem remains the same. Why do you need it? Why do you need things to taste sweet? Ask yourself that question before you start defending these products, because most likely you are defending them out of Stockholm Syndrome. It's your addiction that's speaking. Second question by Pedro. You mentioned in the video that many vegetables from the supermarket have minimal nutritional value. How are we supposed to work around this? Okay, the workaround. Well, the workaround is a bitch, of course, because every single agriculteur, as we say in French, farmer, has fallen for the trap of year-round production of vegetables because it's what yields the most revenue. They understand that if they produce in bulk non-stop, they can just sell in bulk and they can make money out of it. Whereas if you try to do it the proper way and use winter to let the ground regenerate, well, you are going to run into problems. Keep in mind also that it's not just one winter, right? You're supposed to wait years. You're supposed to let the ground recover for years. Of course, no one would actually do that nowadays because it's a waste of space. It's a waste of real estate. So how do you work around that? One, you find a farmer that is reasonable and actually still does it, if you're lucky enough. Or two, you find vegetables that are the least affected by it. As I said, tomatoes and cucumbers tend to be very affected, but other vegetables have a higher ability to develop and to gather nutrients in their core without as many minerals available in the soil. For example, potatoes. Potatoes are a good example. What other example can I give you? Usually roots of all sorts are very resilient, so they have a good ability to develop and conserve nutrients in their core again. Some flimsy vegetables with very thin skins don't have that ability. So it's a tough toss-up, especially if you live in a place that has no sun. Unless you buy from other countries, which also apply the same practices I described previously, you're going to have a very tough time. The best thing you could do is have your own garden. I know that it's not practical, but it really is the best way to go about it. But if you can't, again, look at vegetables and fruits available around you and try to make the selection as best you can. And that's it for this. Now, next question by Vin Van Hout. You say you eat about 70 grams of protein max. How do you spread this through the day and what sources do you find use the best? So, yes, I eat very low proteins and many people would be surprised. I do that because I used to do the exact opposite and eat a ton of protein, and the only thing I saw is problems to my health and also no additional gains whatsoever. When I dropped my proteins to what I eat now, I saw no difference. So why would I keep eating a ton of proteins if my body clearly shows me it doesn't need it? There is no point. That's why I eat more carbs. Now, the way I make it work is this. The way I spread through the day is simple. I usually have my proteins at night because, again, I eat mostly lean proteins and non-carby, in a sense, non-starchy vegetables at night. I also will have a protein snack throughout the day at some point, either with my lunch or I will have it with my breakfast, etc. So usually the spread is going to be, my dinner will be around 35, 40 grams of protein, something like this. And then I will calculate like 20 grams here, 20 grams there twice a day. It's very easy to do actually if you are someone who likes to snack more than they like to have big meals, which is exactly my case. Now, the sources. Again, I used to be the type that used to eat tons of eggs, 12 eggs a day. I used to eat tons of steak. I would eat 500 grams of red meat a day. Tons of fish, all of that stuff. What I have found nowadays is that a lot of these sources came with a host of complications for me, and so I cut them off completely. I have recently removed all red meats from my diet, all dairy from my diet, all pork from my diet. I now eat mostly chicken and turkey. These are my favorite sources. Then I eat salmon, raw salmon, and cooked salmon. And I also eat fish like sardines and tuna. That's where most of my proteins come from. After that, it also comes from eggs and also vegetables. So lentils, beans, all of these are sources of protein that I also enjoy. Duck Pine Tree, next question. What do you think about natural stacks? Natural stacks. So here we're talking about one or two things. We're talking about either the practice of consuming tonic herbs, so technically that are just vegetables or herbs, whatever you want to call them, or the practice of having something that like a supplement stack that is natural. Again, it's always great to look at you and the you of the past to realize the monkey and the moron you used to be. I used to be the type that had like a stack this big of supplements and I would never miss them. It was this pill and it was this powder at this time of the day and 3 protein shakes and all of that jazz. All of that did nothing for me. It was expensive, it was heavy on my mental health because I had to remember to do it all the time. And I realized at some point that it was completely useless because when I cut 80% of it, it changed nothing in my physique, my strength, my progression, nothing. So I think that natural stacks are dangerous just because of the semantics. Look at the terms. Natural stacks. What is a stack? Who started to popularize the term stack? PED users. Naturals constantly copy the methods of PED users, get no benefit, and wonder why. It's because it's pushed onto us with the idea that it's going to yield the same benefits that they get, but of course it won't. We are just, in a sense, wannabe drug users. So this needs to stop. If you're someone who takes a ton of supplements, cut them, take 50% off, because I guarantee you that for the most part, it doesn't do much. You working for the supplement industry? Why are you trying to sabotage the video? Huh? Alright. It's probably sponsored by Gorilla, whatever the fuck that supplement company is. So that's that for natural stacks. Now, I'm not anti-supplements. What I'm telling you, however, is to only get the ones that do something for you. After all of my researches and selection, I have found that there's only 3 things that really work for me. Creatine, MSM powder, and bee pollen. And bee pollen I don't take 6 months out of the year. And guess what? These supplements are dirt fucking cheap. The most expensive supplements tend to be the most garbage because they tend to be the most hyped. They tend to be the ones that are pushed onto you with like bullshit marketing practices, etc. So avoid them like the plague. Only take the bare minimum. As for herbs, I do recommend you try herbs and see if they work for you. It's the same logic. For me, I take garlic and I take ginger. These two work wonders for me, so I take them raw. Same logic here. You want to put the natural back in natural stacks. You want to eat mostly food and you want to reduce your consumption of supplements. That, for me, for natural lifters, is the best way to go and also to save money. Next question by Lispy Dipshit. What a name. What are your thoughts on orthorexia? Do you think it's an actual problem to only want to eat unprocessed foods and not eat for pleasure? To me, it seems like a way to shame those who are disciplined enough to reject junk foods, have no craving for them. Bingo, exactly this. You will notice something in this word where when people start to develop healthy and self-conscious practices to better their life, you always will have professionals that are going to come up with terms to present these practices as pathologies. I'm not telling you that it's impossible to develop an eating disorder if you over-focus on having a clean diet. That is absolutely possible, and many bros, many Z's-bra bros have experienced that, and it has greatly damaged their mental health and their gains. However, if you're someone who rejects junk food and who eats a whole food diet day in and day out, this is not orthorexia, it's just being normal. That's the way we used to eat before all of these companies started pushing the over-processed garbage on us. It is the way for optimal health, it is the way for optimal ownership as well of your own life. That way you're not just a baby being spoon-fed products under 15 layers of packaging that are just loaded with preservatives and sodium and all of that garbage. So you absolutely want to stay away from all of that stuff. Also, anyone who eats for pleasure has an eating disorder, meaning that it's perfectly fine to eat something because it tastes good. But if you only eat it because it tastes good and you ignore all of the side effects that it brings, for example, sugar, then you have a problem. Then you have developed something that is akin to an addiction. An addict is someone who does things for pleasures and pleasure's sake only, and who ignores all of the consequences. So anyone who is not like that, who is disciplined enough to reject pleasure for pleasure's sake, is someone who is on the right path. Never let anyone shame you for doing that. As long as your mental health doesn't suffer, you are good. Johnny Tatum. My question has to do with the vegan diet. I'm an Orthodox Christian, and almost half the year we have dietary restrictions that limit our meat intake. My priest has given me an exception to eat fish, which has been incredibly helpful, but I was wondering how I can continue to progress, if not at the very least maintain, so I can progress outside of the fast days. Big respect for everything you do, thanks, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so first and foremost, we're going to break a big myth. It is absolutely possible to make gains without consuming meat. Yes, I know, big shocker. I know it's very trendy to shit on vegans and say that it's impossible to be a man and to be bulky without meat. That's not true. It's just that it takes a different strategy and methodology. Now, is it optimal for most people to only consume vegetables? No, but it's doable. And the good thing for you is that you don't even have to do that. Meaning that you can still have something that resembles an omnivorous diet. Correct me if I'm wrong, but your restrictions don't include eggs, for example. Eggs can be a great replacement for meat. You will get all of vitamins and minerals that you would otherwise miss, and you will get a ton of proteins. That is something that you can do. I don't want to be disrespectful here, but if I'm not mistaken again, I do believe that the term meat only concerns a select amount of meat, meaning that there are exceptions. And it seems to me here that your priest has accepted fish for you, so you can still consume fish. You should be all good. Don't worry about that. I know that there is a certain level of anxiety associated with not being able to consume certain animal products, such as red meat. This is not necessary for gains. There is nothing special about that type of meat. It's just that it contains a different set of minerals and macronutrients you can find somewhere else. It might not be as bioavailable if you consume it via vegetables, but it is still doable. So if your problem is a dilemma between your spirituality and your gains, keep in mind one thing. You can actually have the two together. It's the same that I tell to Muslims. Yes, you can still lift during Ramadan and make gains. Will it be optimal gains? No, but it doesn't matter. The spiritual will take over the physical for a few months, and then you can reverse the balance. Then you can reestablish the order if this is something that is very important for you. As for the fast days, outright, I don't fast, so I'm not going to give you any type of advice on it, but I have heard very serious lifters who do fast and who have no problems with making gains, so you should be alright as well. Next question. Sadish Snake. How do you figure out what someone's body fat is? You mentioned how having visible abs can still put someone in the 17% range. Then, of course, to use an extreme example, there are starving people in very poor countries who don't have abs, and it would be ludicrous to say they have a high body fat because they don't have abs. Okay, I'm clicking read more, and okay, yeah. What's the best way to measure that? Well, we're going to cut to the chase here. There's no best way to measure body fat, and also measuring your body fat is entirely useless. And to that, I know that it's shocking because there's an obsession on YouTube Fitness about body fat this, body fat that. I have a question for you. What are you going to do with that information? Like, it's the same with people who get their T levels tested. If it comes down that you have low T, what are you going to do? Take TRT? It's the same with body fat. Well, the body fat test is going to tell you that you're a fat ass, then what? You're going to lose weight. You would have lost weight anyway, regardless, because you know that you're a fat ass. Why are you waiting for a machine to confirm it? It's not important. You have been, again, completely bamboozled by the morons on YouTube Fitness who tell you that it's super important. It's super important because it allows them to sell you programs and supplements. They're going to start with 18% body fat, then they'll shred down to 13% and say, oh, it's my program or it's my supplement, or they'll say it's because of my practices. Nonsense. They just lost body fat. Anyone can do that. Do not worry about that. Worry about looking good and feeling good. It's all you need. The metric of the exact body fat that you have in your body does nothing to help you train or plan your nutrition. Look at me. I don't know how much body fat I have on my frame. Do you think I care? Someone could tell me I'm 2%, it wouldn't change my life. You could tell me I'm 35%, it wouldn't change my life. I look good, I feel good, I perform. That's all that really matters. Second question. Are some people naturally able to have a lowish body fat all year round without affecting muscle gains? Yes, meaning that the optimal range in which you can build muscle optimally changes from person to person. For example, I have never tested it, but I'm fairly certain that for someone like me, if I went down to 10%, I would suffer. I know people who are at 12, 11% and who make good gains. How is that possible? It's possible because their range is more skewed towards shredded or lean, whereas mine is more skewed towards fluffy. Meaning that if these same guys were at my body fat percentage, they wouldn't be doing good because their body is not the type that does well with that much fat on their frame. These are genetic differences, right? Maybe you will end up with a body type that you won't like. I like being big, so I'm rejoiced with the fact that I can be that high in body fat and feel amazing. But it really depends from person to person. Is the reason why, again, people who use body fat percentages to tell you that if you're this range, you won't make gains, or if you're this range, you will be too fat. All of that is nonsense. It depends on the way your body actually handles the fat, both visually and biologically. So that's that. As a natural, how do you find a low enough body fat range without damaging your health? I love recomps for that. Get to a body that you like, with size that you like, and then recomp from there. And you're going to slowly lose body fat. And I think that the day this stalls is the sign that you have reached a plateau, or your body is like, all right, that's it. Like, we can't lose more fat. But I can tell you that it's going to take you years. Because I'm still recomping from 210 to 210, and I see no sign of it stopping. I still drop body fat here and there. I might stall and have to bulk again in 4 or 5 years, but it hasn't happened yet. It's a very slow process. So don't worry about that. And we are going to end with this. It's a short Q&A today. If you have any questions, my friends, please let me know for Nutrition Q&A number 4. And if anyone is kind enough to timestamp this, I expend my gratitude and I will be seeing you next time.